Good afternoon, I'm Rabbi Debbie Bravo, and this is our first episode of Cooking with Makom from Afar. Today we're going to be making chicken soup like your grandma made it, and I'm going to share with you the ingredients and get it started, and then you'll have it all in one video, but we'll come back and forth a little bit. Just to show you the ingredients, I tend to use Empire kosher chicken, cut up the 8-piece chicken. You can make a lot of chicken soup with just one package. If you choose to not use the kosher chicken and want regular chicken, that's fine. Just make sure you add a little extra salt. In addition, you have some soup greens. The soup greens that I choose are the ones that are pre-packaged, though when I'm making large quantity, I tend to just buy them one item at a time. Typically, you have parsley and a turnip, an onion, carrot, celery, and a few other things might be in there. In addition, you have only 3 other ingredients. You have the osem, consomme, chicken stock, and this comes in a powder form like a spice. It's just easier than adding your own spices. I have as well the telma chicken cubes, and I have kosher salt. So we are going to use a 20-quart pot, and we're going to just use 1 package of chicken, 1 package of soup greens, but we're going to triple the spices. If you only have a smaller pot and you want to simply make 1 recipe, you can do 1 chicken or even less than a whole chicken, some greens, and just 1 tablespoon of the consomme and 1 buyon cube and 1 tablespoon of salt. But we're going to do a bigger pot. So the first thing that you do is we open up our package of chicken. We make sure to rinse off the chicken and then put it at the bottom of the large pot. So of course you've got 8 large pieces, spread it out into your pot after you rinse. And don't worry, because at the end everything will float to the top. And if you come up with some delicious recipes for the boiled chicken, sometimes in my house we eat it plain for dinner the night I make the soup, or you might be one who likes chicken salad. Once the chicken, if you look here, is in the pot, then we cover this pot almost all the way full with cold water. At this time, we put in our kosher salt. So since we're tripling our regular recipe, we're going to do 3 tablespoons of kosher salt throughout our pot. And again, if you're not using the kosher chicken, you might want to add a little more salt to your mixture. It takes a little while to fill up the pot, so while that is happening, I'm going to get my other spices ready. We don't need them quite yet, but I'm going to take 3 tablespoons of our osem chicken mix, chicken flavored, and we're going to put 3 tablespoons into a bowl. And as well, we're going to have 3 buyon cubes. Opening a buyon cube with gloves on is a little challenging, but we can handle it. So we put them into our bowl and just get them ready for later. And one of them went flying, so here we go. Of course, the chicken soup can easily be frozen. Actually, my family prefers when I freeze it and then defrost it because the fat rises to the top and it's much easier to be able to skim the fat. So once the pot is nearly full, then I'm going to place it onto the stove top, and I'm going to cover it and let it boil. And once it's boiling, then we will be able to add our next set of ingredients. So it can be heavy, just put it on your stove top, cover tightly, put it on high. Don't forget about it, but it will take a while, especially if you've got a large pot like mine. let it come to a boil, and we'll be back with you in a while. And we're back. About a half an hour has passed. Our pot here is just about boiled. You can hear it a little bit, and you can even see if my cameraman, my son Sam, will just come in a little closer. You can see what it's looking like. It's foaming on top. So it's just about ready. While we're letting that finish boiling, we already have our spices ready to go, which means it's time to get our vegetables ready. So take your vegetables, whatever you decide you want to use. If you have allergies or certain things you really like, then feel free to include or exclude them. We have a couple carrots, some spice, we rinse. We're gonna cut things up, and I like to just toss it into this strainer here, and it just sits there waiting until I'm ready to toss it in, which won't be for a little bit. Cut off the ends, slice things in half if you'd like. You don't need to chop the onion, just peel it and cut it into perhaps 2 large pieces. And though I have a disposal in my sink, they say onion peels are not good for the disposal. I'm gonna cut off the edges here. Put a few carrots in. If you love carrots, you can always put a few more. And just cut off the edges of the celery as well. A little bit of onion. Rinse your parsley and your dill. Throw it all in so your vegetables are ready to go, cut and clean. And we'll be using those a little bit later. We have to first put the spices in and let everything boil. So now I can hear that my water is just about boiled. So you can use either a spoon like this or a spoon like this that has holes. You can try and just skim the schmutzy stuff. That's the fat that's floating to the top. So if you see here, we just skim it, toss it right into your sink. Just skim it all off. Makes it a little less fatty. Don't worry, there's plenty of fat that stays in the soup for the good taste of it, but your stomach doesn't really need all that extra fat. So just take it out, skim it to the best of your ability. Like I said, if you choose to freeze and then eat, it will be even easier to skim more of the fat. And once you get all that fat off, then we'll be ready to put the spice in. So we're gonna let it boil just a couple more minutes, and then we're going to dump the spice in. In the meantime, let me just point out, if you can show the camera down here, I'm going to, in addition to the chicken soup, we're gonna make some matzah balls and we're gonna make some noodles. So I happen to be a big fan of the Manischewitz matzo ball mix. People love these matzo balls, and I promise you I follow the instructions on the box. These 2 boxes are, believe it or not, identical. One is the old box, this is the newer box, but they're both good. If you are somebody who keeps strict kosher for Passover and you're cooking for Passover, make sure that it has the P next to the U. Some of them are made during the rest of the year and they don't have the P. All you need for the matzo balls will be some oil and some eggs, and it's really easy to do, so you can get that ready, and we'll get to that very shortly. So I hear my water boiling. I'm going to do one more round of skimming here. You can see there's a bit more to skim at this point, so we're gonna just do one more round of skimming. And the other thing you really have to think about is if you are going to freeze it, which is a great thing to do, make sure you have good containers to freeze in, and make sure that they're the right size containers based on how many people you typically serve. So I often have Shabbat dinners for 25 people, so I put them in large containers. But if you're somebody who's only feeding your family of 4, you're going to want some containers that are a little bit smaller that you can easily put into the freezer. Make sure that you don't fill those containers all the way to the top because they will explode, and make sure that they're good solid containers that can be put into the freezer. So we've done our skimming, and at this point the water is starting to boil. We just sprinkle in our spice and let this boil for at least 30 minutes. You could go 45 if you want. Make sure you put your vent on, which I'm going to do after we finish recording so you can hear me. And let it boil 30 to 45 minutes, set a timer, and we'll be back with you after that. And we're back. It's been about 45 minutes. Our pot has been boiling nicely all this time. So before I pour in our bowl of vegetables, I actually look, and a fair amount of the liquid has gone down, so I'm actually just going to pour a little bit more water into the pot. You can do this or not do this, it's up to you. If you're going to let it simmer for hours, it won't make a difference and it'll taste delicious. If you want to do this faster, then don't add any more water. So I'm going to just add a little bit more water, just because we can make a little more soup that way. And we put plenty of spice in there as well. And then I'm going to dump in my vegetables, and I'm going to let it simmer for at least an hour and a half, and it could be for much longer. So we're going to dump the water in. Once you dump the water, you should bring it back to a boil. And then once it's back to a boil, just carefully put your vegetables in. You're going to want this strainer in the bowl later when you strain your soup. So we're going to leave it. We're going to cover it. We're going to turn it down to a simmer and set your timer for at least 90 minutes. But again, it can go for hours. And we'll be back when we're ready to take the soup off the stove. So approximately 2 hours has passed. Our soup has been simmering all of this time, so we're going to take the soup off of the stove top. Now, best to do this over an empty open sink. So you take a bowl and a strainer and you put it into the sink. You take your very hot soup and very carefully you strain it into your bowl. And like I said earlier, make sure you have enough containers to be able to store, especially if you're going to be storing in the freezer. So I have bought a number of these containers, which you can easily get at Amazing Savings or any one of the party stores. You can order them online, Restaurant Depot. Normally I would save in large containers, but this week I have a feeling we're going to prefer the smaller containers. And then we just pour carefully into the containers. Don't fill them to the top because it will expand in the freezer. So we pour it all in. And of course, make sure you leave for yourself some of it out so you can have some for dinner on the day that you make your soup. So we'll just do a few more. And we'll be back with you in just a moment. So we just finished the very end of pouring the soup. As you can see, it filled quite a number of containers here. And what's left in my strainer is the chicken and the carrots. And typically what I'll do is just take the skin off when it gets a little bit cooler and have this for dinner this evening. You could use it for chicken salad or whatever else you might decide. While we're waiting to have the chicken soup, I just wanted to show you very quickly how to make matzah balls. Very simply using the Manischewitz matzo ball mix. Either box is the same. I tend to make them in quantity. Today we'll just do 2 boxes. You need to have a bowl. I like one this size. You need eggs and oil and a pot of water. So if you look over here, this pot is boiling for us to get ready. We're gonna do 4 packets, which if you follow the directions, that's 8 eggs. My family goes through eggs very quickly, so we buy them by the case at Restaurant Depot. It's a helpful hint if you're looking for less expensive eggs. So we're going to put in the 8 eggs. We're going to pour in the oil, and we will then mix. Be back in a moment. So we've got our 8 eggs cracked in a bowl, and now we're going to do 8 tablespoons of oil. If you have one of these lovely little pours, because I live with a baker, I have one. So this is 4 tablespoons and 4 more is 8. We're going to pour the oil in, stir up the oil and the eggs, and then we of course add the packets. Easy enough to open with just the kitchen scissors. So we're going to throw that in there. 2 more. And using just a simple fork, no mixer is necessary. Just mix up your mix until it's kind of a similar consistency. All the eggs should get mixed in and the oil so that it's all one consistency. Once you get it to that consistency, which you'll see in just a moment, then we're going to put it into the refrigerator for about a half an hour. So you can see here, and this is what it looks like. We're ready to go in the fridge. I leave the fork in there because you might as well just leave it there for when you need it afterward. And we're back. It's been about 45 minutes. The matzo ball mix has gotten a little chilled in the fridge, and now we're going to just mix it up a little bit. And I highly recommend gloves for this part of the meal because you're gonna quickly roll the balls. So I try to make them about the same size. And in the meantime, I have a pot of water with salt in it that is boiling, about to come to a boil. And it's really quite simple. All we're going to do is roll these matzo balls. You can see very easy. They're pretty greasy, so they come right off your hands, especially if you're using gloves. And we're going to roll them, and we're going to just put them into the hot water. And just before we put them in, I turn my back stove, because I have an electric stove, not a gas one. Gas is a little easier. But because I have electric, I turn my back burner on to low because we want it to simmer. Now this is one thing where I differ from the box. The box says 20 minutes. I cook them for 25 minutes on simmer. They seem to need that extra 5 minutes to make them the perfect consistency. Another note, some people use seltzer in their water. Some people make them in chicken soup. I find that it does not need the seltzer, and I also find that if you cook them in chicken soup, they get very salty because they absorb the soup. So I much prefer to make them separately in water with a little salt, and then right before we're going to serve them with the soup, I just pop them in a large pot of soup. Speaking of the soup, you can see all the containers over here. If I was making soup for dinner tonight, I would throw it into a pot on the stove top, and that way I would be able to warm up the matzo balls. You can see behind me there's a bowl with some chicken and a bowl with the veggies, so that can be a meal the night that you make the soup, or you can just freeze it all if that's your preference. One other note, my family likes to have refined egg noodles with their matzo ball. This is the Manischewitz brand, but you can get them at any place. Buy the noodles. They take about 3 minutes to cook. If you're smart, put a little oil into the pot so they don't stick to the pot or to the colander. And then you've got a really nice meal of matzo ball soup, matzo balls, and noodles, chicken and veggies if you like as well. And in just a few moments, we'll come back and see the final product of your matzo balls along with the soup. And we're ready for the final product. Our matzo balls are done. We take them off the back, out of the bowl, and you can put them right out to serve. This is what they should look like. And if you cut into one, you don't want it to have that matzah meal look the way it did when it was uncooked. You want it to be nicely cooked through. And you add a little bit of noodles, put in some soup, and now we're going to add our soup into the bowl. And if you want a little bit of that nice boiled chicken, even a carrot, and voila, you've got a beautiful bowl with matzo balls, noodles, chicken, and carrots, or you could just serve it matzo balls and soup, or just with noodles and soup, whatever your preference. Enjoy.